I used to think evil had a face. Something you could see coming, a sneer, a darkness in the eyes, a sign. Now I know better. Sometimes it wears a polite smile and carries a stack of lesson plans. My name is Elena Ward. 42. 2 degrees, 1 daughter, and a marriage I used to describe as stable, when I didn't want to call it boring. My husband, Daniel, is a senior architect, organized to the point of obsession. He likes blueprints because they behave, walls stay where you draw them. Life, unfortunately, does not. Our daughter, Sophie, is 12, bright, anxious, the kind of child who memorizes constellations instead of TikTok dances. When her grades in math started slipping, Daniel said we needed help. A tutor. He found one faster than I could argue. She's perfect, he told me over breakfast, flipping his phone around to show a profile picture. A young woman, mid-20s, clean smile, eyes that looked like they could see right through the screen. Her name's Lila, he said. Came highly recommended. Lila arrived 3 days later, on a Tuesday that smelled of burnt coffee and rain. She was taller than I expected, polite, poised, hair tied back neatly, no ring, no makeup except a flick of eyeliner. She wore confidence like a second skin. Mrs. Ward, she said, voice smooth enough to pour over ice. Thank you for having me. I remember noticing her shoes first. Expensive, but worn, the kind of detail you notice when you don't mean to. Sophie liked her instantly. Within 10 minutes they were laughing over an algebra puzzle, heads bent close together. I stood in the doorway, watching. Something in me, something small and instinctive, tightened. It wasn't jealousy, exactly, more like recognition. The way Lila listened, the way she looked around our kitchen, absorbing it all, the framed vacation photos, the coffee mug with Daniel's initials, the rhythm of our life. She didn't look like someone entering a stranger's home. She looked like someone returning to one. For the first few weeks, nothing outwardly wrong happened. But subtle things began to shift. Sophie's lessons always ran long, 10, sometimes 15 minutes past the hour. Lila would apologize with a bright smile, saying they lost track of time. Daniel started getting home earlier on tutoring days. At first, I thought it was because he liked seeing Sophie's progress. Then I noticed he'd shower and change before Lila arrived. One evening, as I set out tea, I caught Lila glancing toward the front door just before Daniel walked in, like she knew the sound of his car before anyone else did. Their hellos were too familiar. His smile too quick. When I mentioned it to him that night, he laughed. You're imagining things, Lena. She's helping our daughter, not me. But I couldn't unsee the way he said her name later, when thanking her, soft, deliberate, as if tasting it. There's a difference between paranoia and intuition. Paranoia whispers lies, intuition bleeds truth slowly, one uneasy heartbeat at a time. By the 3rd month, I started keeping mental notes. Not on paper, he'd find that, but small mental snapshots. Lila's perfume, something woody, expensive. Her phone face down during lessons. The way Daniel lingered near the study door, pretending to check emails. One afternoon I found Lila alone in the kitchen. Sophie had gone to her room for a snack break. Lila was standing by the counter, scrolling her phone. When she noticed me, she locked it so fast it almost slipped from her hand. Everything okay? I asked. Perfect, she said, too quickly. Then she smiled. You have a beautiful home. Her eyes lingered on the wedding photo on the wall, Daniel and me in Greece, sun in our faces, laughter caught mid-breath. It must be nice, she added softly, to have someone look at you like that. I couldn't tell if it was admiration or accusation. That night, I dreamed of her standing in our bedroom doorway, watching us sleep. Daniel started traveling again, or so he said. Late night calls, unexplained meetings. I'd hear him in the living room, voice lowered, tone too intimate for business. Once, I walked in unexpectedly. He ended the call mid-sentence. Client, he said. Big project. He avoided my eyes. Meanwhile, Lila grew bolder, still polite, still perfect. But her presence began to hum through the house like static. She asked personal questions, how long Daniel and I had been married, where we met, whether I ever missed working full time. When I hesitated to answer, she filled the silence herself. "You must trust him completely," she said once, handing me Sophie's corrected homework. That's rare. Something about the way she said trust made me cold. The first real fracture came on a Thursday evening. Daniel was working late. Leela was in the study with Sophie, and I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. A courier handed me a small envelope addressed to Leela Gray. Our address, our house. Before I could ask, Leela appeared behind me, snatched the envelope, and smiled too brightly. "Oops!" Must have had it sent here by mistake. I watched her carry it upstairs, my heartbeat drumming in my throat. Later that night, after she left, I found the torn corner of that same envelope in the trash. The postmark was from another city, one Daniel had visited the week before. I started digging. It wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about survival. I checked Leela's references. Non-existent. The tutoring agency she claimed to work for had no record of her. When I confronted her with it, she didn't flinch. "Oh, that's odd," she said, smiling. "Maybe a paperwork mix-up." She looked me straight in the eyes. "You can call me directly if you need anything. No middleman." Her tone was almost daring me to look deeper. Daniel dismissed my concerns again, but he was avoiding me now. Half answers, half smiles. The air in our house felt charged, like the moment before a storm when the trees go still. Then came the night of the power outage. The lights went out during one of Sophie's lessons. Thunder shook the windows, rain smeared the glass. I lit candles and went to check on them. The study door was closed. I heard low voices. Leela's calm, Daniel's strained. I was about to knock when Leela's voice changed, lower, intimate. "Someone will hear us," she whispered. The silence that followed was worse than any confession. I opened the door. They were standing apart, too far to be caught, too close to be innocent. Daniel spun around, startled. "Lena." But Leela spoke first, smiling that professional smile. "Your husband was just helping me find a flashlight," she said. The storm growled outside, echoing my heartbeat. After that night, Sophie's lessons stopped without explanation. Daniel claimed Leela had a family emergency. Yet I saw him one morning, standing in the driveway, checking his phone with a look that wasn't worry. It was longing. I should have walked away then. Instead, I became my own detective. I searched her name online, Leela Gray. Dozens of results, none matching her face. Then, buried deep in an old municipal record, I found something: marriage certificate. Daniel Ward and Lila Garrison. Different surname, same husband. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The date was 6 years ago, before Sophie was born. Before our wedding anniversary. I didn't confront him right away. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to understand what kind of man comes home to 2 wives and still sleeps soundly. I began rehearsing the conversation in my head, imagining his excuses. But when it happened, it was nothing like I planned. He came home late, smelling faintly of her perfume. The woody one. I showed him the printout. He froze. Then, quietly, "It's not what you think." The classic line. Always the wrong one. I asked him who she was. He said nothing. Just looked at me like I'd already lost. That was the moment I realized truth isn't always a revelation. Sometimes it's a trapdoor. Leela stopped coming altogether after that, but traces of her lingered. The scent on his shirts, the echo of her laugh in Sophie's stories. Sophie missed her tutor. She didn't understand the silence that followed. And Daniel. He behaved as if nothing had happened, as if the truth could be folded up neatly and stored away like a blueprint gone wrong. But I knew better. People like Leela don't just disappear. They wait. It's been 3 months since then. Every night, I hear Daniel's phone vibrate on the nightstand. He thinks I'm asleep. Sometimes he answers, sometimes he just listens. Last night, I caught a whisper through the darkness. Her voice. She said, "You can't hide her forever." I don't know who she meant, me or Sophie. But I know the game isn't over. It's only changing shape, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. It's strange how silence can take shape, how it presses against the walls until it feels like another presence in the house. Since Leela left, Our home has been too quiet. Not peaceful, suffocating. Every sound feels magnified: Sophie's footsteps upstairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of Daniel's chair when he works late. Sometimes I imagine I hear her voice drifting through the vents, low, measured, deliberate. Maybe I'm haunted. Or maybe I've just started listening to the wrong things. Daniel acts like everything is normal. He makes coffee every morning, leaves his mug in the same spot, kisses my cheek like a man performing a ritual he no longer believes in. He doesn't know I've stopped drinking my coffee. I can't stand the smell anymore. It reminds me of that day she came into our kitchen, the faint scent of roasted beans and her perfume mingling like something dangerous disguised as familiar. Sophie asks about Leela every few days. When's she coming back? I tell her Leela's moved away. Why didn't she say goodbye? Because she was never really here, I want to say. Because she belonged to a world built on lies, and we were just the set pieces. Instead, I smile and tell her tutors come and go. That's what adults do. They leave. I've started walking at night. It's the only time I can think. The streets are empty, the kind of suburban dark that's not really dark. Porch lights glowing like watchful eyes. Sometimes I walk past Daniel's office window. He sits there, the glow of his screen painting his face pale blue. He looks older. Other times, he's not there at all. Once, I saw him standing by his car, talking on the phone. He turned his back when I appeared. The call ended quickly. He smiled at me, too quickly. Client, he said again. Always a client. I've started wondering how many lies a marriage can hold before it collapses under its own weight. I think ours is close to the limit. A week after the power outage night, after the truth crawled into the light, I tried calling the number from Leela's old tutoring flyer. Disconnected. Her email bounced back. She'd erased herself perfectly, like she was never real. But then, a strange thing happened. A postcard arrived in our mailbox. No return address. Just a single word written on the back. Hello. The handwriting was delicate. Familiar. I turned it over. The front showed a picture of the same coastal town Daniel had traveled to. Weeks before I found the marriage certificate. He swore it was a conference. Now I wonder if it was a honeymoon. The cracks in our marriage are invisible to anyone else. To friends, we're still the Wards. Solid, composed, and viable. We host dinner parties, we smile through conversations, we pretend. But beneath the table, my hands shake. The pretending is exhausting. Especially when I start noticing how easily Daniel slips between versions of himself. At work, he's charming. At home, distracted. With me, polite. With Sophie, distant. And somewhere I suspect with her, still hers. The worst part isn't that he lied. It's that he made me complicit by believing him. I started following him. Just once at first. Curiosity disguised as courage. He said he had a late client meeting downtown. I waited 20 minutes after he left, then drove out too, keeping a few cars behind. It was raining. One of those cold, misty rains that blurs headlights and morals alike. He parked near a small restaurant. Not one we'd ever been to. Intimate. Expensive. I watched from across the street as he stepped inside. A woman joined him at the table, her back to me. But even through the glass I knew. The tilt of her head, the way she held her wine glass, deliberate, rehearsed. Leela, my pulse crashed in my ears. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She wasn't gone. She wasn't even hiding. I almost went in, almost. But something stopped me, not fear, but the need to see more. They talked for an hour. His hand brushed hers once. She smiled. And he looked at her the way he used to look at me years ago. Like she was the blueprint, and he was just trying to build himself around her. When he left, I stayed. She lingered at the table, alone, sipping her drink like she had all the time in the world. Then she looked directly at me. Not at the window, not by accident. Right, at me, she smiled. That smile followed me home. It wasn't the kind you forget. It was a message, a signature. She wanted me to know she wasn't afraid. Daniel came home late that night. I was sitting in the dark, waiting. He smelled like rain and guilt. Good meeting, I asked. He hesitated. Long. Productive, I smiled back, the same smile she gave me through the glass. I'm sure it was. He didn't notice the postcard sitting on the counter. Since that night, I've started seeing her everywhere. Or maybe she's making sure I do. At the grocery store. I catch a glimpse of her hair in the next aisle. At the cafe near Sophie's school, someone leaves a cup behind with lipstick on the rim. Her shade, that deep rose I can't forget. Once, I came home to find a single earring on the front step. Not mine. Not Sophie's. Daniel swore he didn't know how it got there. But I saw the flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Sophie started to withdraw too. She doesn't talk about Leela anymore, but she keeps the little notebook Leela gave her. The one with the gold spine. Last week, I peeked inside. Inside the front cover, written in Leela's neat handwriting, was a line. Always look for the truth in what people don't say. I don't know what that means yet, but I feel like I'm living inside it. The strangest thing is I don't even know what I want now. The truth? Revenge? Peace. All I know is that Leela didn't vanish. She's circling us. Watching, waiting, and Daniel still won't admit she exists. Every marriage has a third presence eventually. A ghost, a secret, a stranger. Ours just happened to knock on the door wearing a tutor's smile. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt too still, like it was waiting for something to happen. I lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. Slow, even. A man asleep beside the ruins he built. I thought about Leela's smile through the restaurant window. It wasn't a threat. It was a claim. A quiet, devastating way of saying, "You're in my story now." The next morning, everything looked deceptively normal. Sunlight through the curtains. Coffee percolating. Sophie's laughter drifting down the hall. But the air between Daniel and me was wrong, charged, metallic. He avoided my eyes when he kissed me goodbye. "I might be home late again," he said. I nodded. "Client." He froze for a fraction of a second. Then, "Yeah, client." The pause told me everything. After he left, I found myself standing in the doorway, holding my coffee until it went cold. Something inside me had changed. The part that used to wait, hope, forgive. Now it watched. I started keeping track of Daniel's lies the way an investigator logs evidence. Timestamps. Voicemails. Every inconsistency, another crack in the facade. And yet, every time I caught him, I hesitated to confront him. Why? Because I wanted to see how far he'd go. Because sometimes knowing is more powerful than proving. That afternoon, I drove to the restaurant. The hostess recognized me immediately, not as myself but as someone else. "Back again so soon?" she asked, smiling. I didn't correct her. "Was I here recently?" I asked. "Last week, same table, with Mr. Ward." She said it so casually that it barely sounded like betrayal. I left a generous tip I didn't owe and walked out before my hands could start shaking. When I got home, Sophie was on the living room floor, surrounded by her homework and that gold spine notebook. She looked up at me with those steady, knowing eyes of hers. "Mom," she said, "did Dad do something bad?" I froze. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Leela said secrets make people sick. And you look sick." I wanted to deny it, but the truth sat heavy on my tongue. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," I managed. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. She said that too. That night I searched the house. Not because I expected to find her, but because I needed to know what was mine. Drawers, cabinets, the back of closets. Everything looked normal, but normal was a lie. Then, in Daniel's office, behind a row of old design portfolios, I found it, a thin envelope. Inside were printed photographs, Daniel and Leela. Together. Not romantic, not explicit, just ordinary snapshots standing near a construction site. Smiling at a cafe table, boarding a plane. But the dates in the corner told the story. Each one aligned with one of his business trips. The last photo stopped me cold. It wasn't old. It was from 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't taken by a stranger. It was taken in our backyard. When Daniel came home, I was sitting in the dark again. He flicked on the light, startled. "Jesus, Lena, you scared me." I held up the photos. He went still. Then, slowly, he He sank into the chair opposite me. Who took these? No answer. Was it her? He rubbed a hand over his face. It's not what you think? I laughed, an ugly, broken sound. That's what you said last time. He looked at me, eyes tired, almost pleading. She's not dangerous, he said. She needs help. Help. I repeated. You married her? He flinched. It wasn't real. It was complicated. I cut him off. Then make it simple. But he didn't. He couldn't. And that told me more than any confession ever would. After he went to bed, I burned the photos in the sink, one by one. The flames curled the edges, the faces blurring into smoke. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt watched. Through the kitchen window, I saw movement across the street, a figure standing under a streetlight, too far to see clearly, too still to be casual. I blinked. Gone. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe her. Either way, the message was the same. I wasn't done. In the days that followed, things began to unravel faster. Daniel grew restless, distracted. Sophie started having nightmares, waking up crying that someone was in her room. I checked every night. No one there. But once, her window was unlocked. That was when I realized Leela wasn't just haunting my marriage. She was inside my house, in our routines, our fears, our daughter's dreams. The perfect stranger had learned how to live among us, even when she wasn't here. The next morning, I woke to the faint smell of smoke still clinging to my hair, a reminder of what I'd burned and what I hadn't. Daniel moved around the house like a man rehearsing normalcy, humming under his breath, checking emails, straightening his tie. The more he pretended, the more unreal he became to me. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, her eyes dull from another sleepless night. I made her breakfast, watched her push eggs around her plate, and wondered if the ghosts in our house were growing bold enough to touch her now. When Daniel left for work, I locked the door behind him and just stood there, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade. I don't know how long I stayed like that, a statue in a house full of whispers, before I picked up my phone and dialed the only number I shouldn't have remembered, Leela's. It rang once, twice, then a soft click. Silence, except for a faint breath on the other end. "Hello," I said. The breath hitched, then a voice calm and unhurried. "You shouldn't have burned them." I froze. "Who is this?" A low chuckle, intimate and cold. "You already know." The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone as if it might start bleeding truth. That afternoon, I picked Sophie up from school early. She looked relieved, as though she'd been waiting for me. In the car, she said, "Mom," I saw her. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Ooh, Lila," she whispered. She was across the street when the bell rang. She waved. My throat went dry. "Did she talk to you?" Sophie shook her head. "She just watched." That night, I told Daniel what she'd said. His expression barely changed, just a flicker, like a shadow crossing his face. "Kids imagine things," he muttered. "Drop it, Lena." But I couldn't. You don't imagine the kind of fear that clings to a child's voice. The next day, I installed a new deadbolt on the front door. The locksmith asked if I'd had a break-in. "Something like that," I said. He smiled politely, unaware that sometimes the intruder doesn't break in. She walks right through your life with a smile. The days blurred after that. I started seeing her car, or what I thought was hers, parked a few houses down, the engine idling. Once I walked toward it, but it pulled away before I could see the driver. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that paranoia was just grief with better instincts. But then the letters started. Small white envelopes slipped under the door, no return address. The first one said only, "He lies to both of us." The second, "You don't know what he did before you." The third contained a photo of Sophie walking home from school, my daughter's face, captured from a distance, unaware. That was when the fear became something else, something physical. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the picture. I went to the police, but what could I say? "My husband's secret wife is stalking us." They nodded politely, took notes they'd never read again, and told me to install cameras, so I did. But every night the feed flickered, static interference, shadows that moved wrong. One night, around midnight, I saw her. Clear as day on the monitor, standing at the end of the driveway, her face half hidden, smiling up at the camera. I ran outside barefoot, adrenaline burning through me, but she was gone. Just the sound of wind and my own heartbeat. When I went back inside, Daniel was waiting in the hallway, pale and tense. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "She's here!" I yelled. "Lila! She was right there!" He stared at me for a long moment, then said softly, "You need help, Lena." Something in his tone broke me. I realized then that he wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of me. The next morning, I found the security footage missing. Every file deleted. Daniel claimed the system had glitched, but I knew better. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, clutching the photo of Sophie, waiting for something, anything, to move in the darkness. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You should ask him about the first house." My blood ran cold. The first house. Before me. Before Sophie. I went through Daniel's files, his old tax records, anything that could explain it. And then I found it. A deed. A property in another town. Purchased under his name 6 years ago, the same year as the marriage certificate. The same year he supposedly met me for the first time. I drove there the next morning without telling anyone. It was a small house, white paint peeling, curtains drawn. Empty but not abandoned. There was a feeling like a breath held too long. On the porch was a single key, tied to a note. "You're late?" My reflection in the window looked like someone else's face. I wanted to walk away, to go back to pretending, but my hand was already turning the knob. The door creaked open, the smell of dust and perfume flooding out in one breath. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs. Daniel, younger, smiling, Leela beside him. In one photo, I was there too, blurred in the background, walking past them on a city street, years before I thought I met him. My chest tightened. I wasn't the first choice. I was the replacement. The proof of it was right there, hanging on the walls of someone else's life. I stumbled out of the house, gasping for air. My phone buzzed again. "Now you see." I didn't reply. I just drove, fast, until the road turned to blur. Back home, Daniel was waiting in the driveway. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just said, "She called me." His voice cracked on the word she. I stared at him, every lie between us visible like veins under glass. "What does she want?" I asked. He hesitated. "You." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The wind picked up, rattling the trees, and in that sound I thought I heard her laugh. Low, distant, inevitable. And that was when I realized the worst truth of all. Leela didn't just want to destroy my marriage. She wanted to trade places. I didn't sleep after that night. Every sound in the house felt amplified, every shadow longer. The next morning, Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, kissed Sophie on the head, and asked if I wanted anything from the store. I watched him from across the kitchen. The way he avoided looking at me, the tension in his shoulders, and I realized we'd entered a new kind of silence, one thick enough to drown in. When he left, I walked down the hallway toward the study. The floor creaked under my feet, a small betrayal of noise in a house that no longer trusted me. I opened the door. The smell hit me first, something faintly metallic, mixed with dust and old paper. On the desk, Daniel's laptop sat open. A single email thread glowed on the screen. The sender's name made my stomach tighten, Leela H. The latest message read, "You promised you'd tell her. She deserves to know before it gets worse." My pulse thudded in my throat. I scrolled up. Dozens of messages, coded in a way that almost seemed innocent until you looked too long. References to or arrangement. The girl. The plan. And then, a week-old message she's starting to remember. Something inside me broke open. I copied every message to a drive and slipped it into my pocket before shutting the laptop. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping somewhere in the house. Tap. Pause. Tap. Tap. It wasn't random. I followed the sound down the hall, past Sophie's room. The tapping stopped the moment I reached her door. I pushed it open slowly. Her room was empty except for the sound of her tablet humming on her desk. The screen showed a chat window, an anonymous user messaging her under the name, "Friend from School." The last message read, "Your mom doesn't tell you everything. Do you want to see where you were born?" My breath caught. Sophie wasn't even looking at the screen. She was on the floor, drawing. I turned off the tablet before she noticed. "Mom," she said without looking up, "do you ever hear whispers in the hallway at night?" My mouth went dry. "What kind of whispers?" She shrugged. "They say my name. But when I go out, there's no one there." I smiled too quickly, the kind of smile that's meant to stop a child's fear before it spreads. "Dreams?" I said. "Just dreams." She looked up at me then, eyes older than they should have been. "Leela says they're not dreams." That night, I moved Sophie into my room. She fell asleep instantly, trusting me completely. I sat awake beside her, listening. The wind outside pressed against the windows, a low, steady breath, and then I heard it again, whispers, faint but deliberate, coming from the hallway. Not words, just the sound of someone thinking out loud. I picked up the flashlight from my nightstand and stepped into the dark. The light cut through dust motes, revealing nothing but the pale wallpaper. Yet the whispers grew louder, closer. I followed them to the study, the same place where I'd found Daniel's emails. The door was slightly open now, though I'd shut it earlier. I pushed it wider. Inside, the laptop screen was glowing again. On it, a live video feed. The camera was angled toward the hallway toward me. I turned, heart hammering, and saw the tiny red light of another camera hidden behind the picture frame. My face stared back at me from the laptop screen. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then a chat window appeared beneath the feed. A single message blinked onto the screen. "You're not supposed to be here." I froze, the glow of the laptop screen painting the room in cold blue. My reflection stared back at me, fractured by pixels and static. I typed before I could think, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You already know. He does too." The camera feed shifted suddenly, panning toward the door as if an invisible hand were moving it. I spun around, expecting Daniel. But the hallway was empty. Just the faint sound of Sophie's breathing from down the corridor. My skin prickled. I slammed the laptop shut and yanked the power cord free, the screen going black with a sharp click. The silence that followed was worse than the whispers. It was the kind of silence that listened. In the morning, Daniel was gone before sunrise. No note, no text. I checked the driveway. His car was still there. That's when I saw it, muddy footprints leading from the front door to the edge of the yard. Small, feminine, bare. Leela. The realization landed like a weight on my chest. She'd been inside again. I checked the locks, the windows, the cameras, all untouched. It was as if she'd slipped through the walls. Later that day, I drove Sophie to school myself. The air was brittle with the kind of quiet that follows a storm. As she got out of the car, she hesitated. "Mom," she said softly, "if someone says they know you better than you know yourself, what does that mean?" I didn't have an answer. I just told her to hurry. On the way home, I called Daniel. No answer. Then I called his office. The receptionist hesitated before saying, "Mr. Hart resigned last week." My grip tightened on the wheel. "That's impossible. He left for work this morning." She paused again, then said, "Mom, I'm looking at his exit form. He cleared his desk last Friday." I hung up. The world outside the windshield started to tilt. By the time I reached home, the sun had dipped low enough to turn the house gold and sharp. A shape moved past the upstairs window. Quick, fluid, wrong. I ran inside, calling his name. The echo that answered wasn't his. Upstairs, our bedroom looked untouched, but the air felt heavy, like someone had been there and left the room breathing differently. On the dresser, a note lay folded in half. I opened it carefully. "Don't follow me. She'll find you anyway." His handwriting rushed and uneven. I stood there for what felt like hours, the walls pressing closer. Then my phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. "Have finally told you. Now it's your turn." Attached was a photo of Daniel sitting in his car outside a motel I didn't recognize, and behind him, reflected in the mirror, Leela. That night, I drove. I told myself I wasn't chasing him, that I just needed to see the truth for myself. The motel was on the edge of town, the kind of place where everything smells like bleach and regret. His car was there, parked beneath a flickering light. I approached slowly, my breath fogging in the air. The front office was empty, the register open, pages fluttering. A noise came from room 6, a faint hum, a woman's voice. I reached for the doorknob, but it turned on its own, opening just enough for me to see inside. The room was dark except for the TV glow. On the screen, home videos played, footage of our living room, our kitchen, Sophie's birthday. The camera panned and stopped on me, smiling unaware. Then the image distorted, and Leela's face filled the frame. "You took everything," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine through the screen. "Now I'll take it back." I stepped inside, heart pounding. The room smelled of perfume and rust. On the bed lay a second envelope, sealed with wax. I tore it open. Inside was a single photo, Daniel and me, asleep in our bed. The picture had been taken from inside the room. I looked up, scanning the ceiling, the corners, and saw the faint outline of a camera lens embedded in the smoke detector. My body went cold. Before I could move, a voice behind me said softly, "He was never yours." I turned, but there was no one there, just the door, swinging shut. I ran out, half blind with panic, and didn't stop until I reached the car. I locked the doors and sat there shaking, until the first hint of dawn bled into the sky. I drove home in silence. The house waited for me, still and patient. When I walked in, the hallway lights flickered once, as if acknowledging my return. Sophie's drawings were scattered across the floor, but they weren't the same ones she'd made before. These were darker, rougher. One showed 3 figures standing in front of our house, a woman, a man, and a girl. The woman's face was split in 2, half me, half Leela. I gathered the drawings, hands trembling, and noticed one had words scrawled across the bottom in a child's handwriting. "She's already here." Morning slid into the house like a thief. I sat on the edge of the sofa, still holding Sophie's drawings, the paper soft from my grip. The air was wrong, too still, too heavy. Like the house itself was waiting to see what I'd do next. Sophie was upstairs, humming quietly, unaware that every sound had become a clue. I needed answers, not ghosts. The only place left to look was Daniel's office downtown, the one he'd supposedly left behind. I found his old access card in a drawer and drove through the gray drizzle until the city rose around me. The building was empty, the reception lights flickering as though power pulsed in a dying heartbeat. When I swiped his card, the elevator came alive. The doors opened to the 6th floor, a corridor lined with glass doors, all dark except one. His nameplate was still there. Inside, the office smelled faintly of aftershave and paper dust. On the desk, a file labeled Project More or. Inside it, photos of rooms. Ours, but not quite ours. The wallpaper patterns were reversed, furniture arranged in mirrored reflection. In one photo, I stood in the doorway, but my face was turned the wrong way, like I was looking into another version of myself. I flipped through the pages until a flash drive fell onto the floor. I plugged it into the computer and a single folder appeared. Video files, dozens of them. I opened the first. Daniel sat in a room identical to our living room but flipped, mirrored. "She thinks I'm still with you," he said to someone off camera. "But she doesn't understand what this is. We built her world, and she moved into it." A woman's voice, Leela's, answered, "Then she's already part of it." I stopped breathing. In the next file, Leela stood where I should have been. In the mirrored house, cradling Sophie's old stuffed rabbit. "She'll see soon," she murmured, staring straight into the camera. "That one of us has to disappear." The file ended with static. I sat there shaking, trying to decide whether any of it was real or some cruel manipulation. But when I looked at the window, my reflection didn't match me. It tilted its head a second later. I left the office without looking back. On the street, the rain felt too cold, too sharp. Every car window reflected that same delayed echo of me. By the time I reached home, the front door was open. Sophie was sitting on the stairs clutching the rabbit. "Mom," she said quietly, "there are two of you." My throat closed. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the hallway mirror. "You're right there?" I turned. In the mirror, my reflection stood perfectly still even though I had moved. Then it smiled, slow, deliberate. I pulled Sophie close and backed away until we hit the wall. The reflection's smile widened, and I realized it wasn't me smiling back, it was her. Leela. The house groaned, the lights flickered, and the reflection leaned forward as if pressing against glass that was suddenly too thin to hold. I grabbed Sophie's hand and ran. We fled through rooms that didn't look right anymore, walls bending, doors leading to places they shouldn't. At the back of the house, I yanked open the basement door, the only place that felt solid. We stumbled down, slammed it behind us, and I braced it with a chair. The dark smelled of damp wood and earth. Sophie was crying softly against my chest. "It's okay," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. I searched for the breaker box and found a second panel beside it, something new, wired recently. The label read, "MIRORFD." I flipped the switch, and every wall lit up with faint projections, our house duplicated in light. In one of the moving images, Daniel stood beside Lila in the mirrored hallway, both of them staring at a version of me and Sophie hiding in this same basement. "She thinks she can run," Leela said. "But she's already inside." The feed froze, their faces blurred, and the lights went out. Silence. Then footsteps above, slow, deliberate, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. I held Sophie tighter, feeling her small body tremble. A whisper drifted down the stairwell, "Elena." My name stretched thin. I took the flashlight, scanned the room, and found a narrow crawl space behind the shelves. "In there," I told Sophie. She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "Go," I said again, firmer this time. When she was hidden, I turned toward the stairs. The door creaked open, a thin wedge of light slicing through the dark. A silhouette appeared at the top, female, familiar. "You don't have to be afraid," she said, her voice soft, almost kind. This was always meant for both of us. I didn't move. "What are you?" I asked. She stepped down one stair at a time, and the light caught her face. Mine, but not mine, calm where I was shaking, eyes full of a certainty I'd never known. "I'm the life he built for you," she said. "And you walked right into it." The floor vibrated, the walls shuddering as though the house itself were exhaling. Every mirror in the basement cracked at once. I lunged forward, slammed the door, and twisted the bolt. For a moment, the world was nothing but sound, splintering glass, Sophie's muffled sobs, my own heartbeat hammering. Then, stillness. I crept back to the crawl space, pulled her out, and whispered, "We're leaving." But when we climbed the stairs, the door at the top opened onto the mirrored house instead of our own. The same furniture, the same pictures, but reversed. In the corner, Leela stood smiling. "Welcome home," she said. The air shimmered, and I realized the mirror between us had finally broken. It took a second for my mind to catch up with what my eyes saw. The mirrored house smelled faintly of lavender and ozone, as if lightning had passed through air that was trying to remember being real. Sophie's hand was a small pulse in mine. Every picture frame on the wall showed a life almost ours. Daniel, me, Sophie. But in each photo I was standing slightly farther away, like a guest in my own world. Leela moved through the hallway as though gravity obeyed her alone. "You built this?" she said. Her voice was calm, nearly tender. "You wished for a life so perfect that it needed another version to hold it together. That's what Daniel gave us." She stopped by the fireplace, running a finger across the mantel. "Two wives, one promise. He thought he could keep the halves from meeting." I wanted to deny it, to scream that she was lying, but the house itself answered for me, photographs sliding to the floor, lights dimming to a breath. I stepped closer, every nerve on fire. "Where is he?" "Here," she said. She turned one of the fallen photos upright. Daniel looked back at me from it, eyes open, mouth half smiling, But his reflection behind the glass wasn't still. It blinked. Then its gaze shifted toward Leela, not me. "He's been on this side since he left," she said. "He never knew how to come back." Sophie tugged my sleeve. "Mom, I don't like it here." Her voice cracked, small and raw. I knelt, holding her face. "Look at me. No matter what happens, you stay behind me, okay?" She nodded, trembling. When I looked up again, Leela was closer, too close. "You keep thinking I'm your enemy," she whispered. "But I was you first." The air rippled. The walls began to hum, a low vibration that settled in my chest like another heartbeat. Behind Leela, the reflection of the hallway stretched deeper and deeper until it became a tunnel of endless mirrors, each one showing a version of me frozen mid-motion. I took a step forward. The copies did the same, perfectly synchronized except for one. The farthest reflection lagged half a second, her expression almost pleading. "That one," Leela said, following my gaze. "That's the original. The rest of us are echoes." I didn't know whether she meant me or her, and for a moment I didn't care. All I wanted was out. I grabbed Sophie's hand and turned toward the door that should have led to the street, but outside was only more house, same facade, same light, repeating forever. Leela's voice followed us. "You can't leave until you choose." "Choose what?" "Which of us gets to stay real?" The words lodged in me like ice. Sophie whimpered, burying her face against my side. "Please," she said. "Make it stop." The ceiling flickered, the floorboards twisted underfoot. I ran, dragging her through a hallway that kept rearranging itself. Every turn led back to the same place, the foyer, the staircase, Leela waiting by the mirror. She watched me with something like pity. "You think I want to destroy you?" "No, Elena. I want you to remember." She raised a hand, and the mirror behind her flared white. Images spilled out. Daniel at a lab bench, younger, desperate, drawing diagrams of neural maps and glass structures. His voice echoed through the room, recorded from another time. If memory can be externalized, identity can be duplicated. Another flash. Me years ago, lying in a hospital bed, wires on my temples, Daniel whispering, "It's just a test." Then blackness. I staggered back. "No," I said. "That's not real." "It is," Leela said softly. "You died for 7 minutes that night. He couldn't let you go, so he made me." The ground seemed to tilt. My memories began to slide, rearranging themselves like broken film reels, moments that didn't fit, edges that never aligned. Birthdays I remembered twice in 2 different kitchens, lullabies sung in voices that weren't quite mine. Sophie's first steps, one in sunlight, one under a cold blue glow. "You're lying," I whispered. Leela smiled, sad. "If I'm lying, why can you remember both lives?" I fell to my knees, clutching my head. Behind my eyes, the hum became words, whispers threading through thought one must fade. The lights brightened until everything was silver. When I opened my eyes, Leela was kneeling across from me, her hand outstretched. "Come with me," she said. "We can end the fracture. Let her." She nodded toward Sophie. "Have one mother instead of 2 ghosts." For a moment I believed her. It would be easy to take her hand, to dissolve into symmetry. But Sophie's sob pulled me back. Her eyes were wide, terrified, alive. "Mom," she said, and in that word was everything. Every sleepless night, every scraped knee, every fragile human moment Daniel's mirror could never have made. I stood. "No," I said. "You're not me." The mirrored world cracked down the center, light pouring through the fracture. Leela screamed, not in pain, but in fury, and lunged forward, reaching. I pulled Sophie close and stepped into the light. For a heartbeat, everything disappeared. When the glare faded, we were standing in our living room again. The air smelled of rain and dust. The mirrors were gone, every one of them reduced to fine silver ash across the floor. Daniel's car was still in the driveway, empty. On the table lay a single note in his handwriting. "The experiment worked. I just don't know which of you survived." Sophie pressed her face into my side. "It's over?" she asked. I looked around the room, the angles slightly wrong, the shadows just a little too slow, and forced a smile. "Yes," I said, but when I passed the hallway mirror, The reflection paused half a second after I did, and then, very softly, it smiled back. Morning light poured into the house like something artificial, too white, too perfect. It clung to the furniture, the walls, the corners, bleaching them clean of their texture. Sophie was still asleep on the couch, a faint crease between her eyebrows as if even her dreams were uncertain. I moved quietly through the rooms, touching the surfaces, the glass picture frames, the smoothness of the counter, listening for anything that didn't belong. Every sound in the house seemed rehearsed. The tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, each rhythm timed just a little too precisely. I whispered my own name just to hear a human imperfection in the air. Nothing answered back, but the silence felt watchful. I started testing things. I flicked the lights off and on again. The delay between switch and glow was identical every time, 1 second flat. I turned on the faucet. The water came out at exactly the same pressure, same temperature, no matter how I twisted the handle. The house had become a program running too smoothly. A part of me wanted to wake Sophie and run, but where? The street outside looked real enough, trees swaying, cars passing, but the horizon seemed too still, like a painted set. By noon, I found Daniel's old notebook hidden behind a loose floorboard. It was full of drawings, circuit diagrams, neuromaps, lists of observation metrics. Each page looked more frantic than the last. One entry stopped me cold. Subject E shows progressive awareness. Mirror breach imminent. Prepare fallback environment. Subject E my name. I flipped the page and found a single photograph taped inside me, sitting in this very kitchen, except the walls were made of glass. Outside, beyond the transparent barrier, people in white coats watched, clipboards in hand. A chill ran through me. I looked around, at the walls, the ceiling, the window frames, and realized I didn't actually know what they were made of. I took a knife from the drawer and pressed it gently against the paint. Beneath the thin surface, there was a shimmer, like metal reflecting through skin. The sound of footsteps made me freeze. Sophie appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mom, the mirrors are back," she said. I turned slowly. At the end of the hallway, where there had been only bare wall, a mirror now stood tall and clean. My reflection stared back, expression blank. I told Sophie to wait, then stepped closer. The reflection didn't move. Not immediately. It watched me, head tilted slightly as though waiting for permission. Then it smiled. A slow, patient smile that didn't reach my eyes. Behind its shoulder, the room in the reflection wasn't ours. The furniture was arranged differently. A second version of me walked past in the background, carrying a tray of food. The light flickered. For an instant, I could see another Sophie sitting at a table, eating, laughing. The mirror world version of me leaned down, kissed her forehead. They both looked happy. I lifted my hand, and my reflection lifted hers. But the other Elena, the one in the mirrored kitchen, didn't stop moving. She glanced toward me and mouthed, "You're not supposed to be here." Then the surface rippled, like water disturbed by breath. I stumbled back. "Mom," Sophie whispered. "Can we leave now?" "Soon." I lied. "I just need to check something." I went to the front door, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It didn't move. I tried again harder. The knob didn't even rattle. The windows wouldn't open either. Outside, the same car drove past again and again. The same woman walking her dog. The same bird landing on the same fence post, looping on an invisible reel. The truth crawled over my skin. We weren't in the real world. We were in whatever Daniel had built as a fallback. The glass house. That night, I pretended to sleep beside Sophie. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the lights flickered, and the mirror in the hallway glowed faintly. I slipped out of bed and stood before it. My reflection, awake this time, raised a finger to her lips, then pointed toward the window. I followed her gaze. Beyond the glass, far in the dark, a figure stood at the edge of the yard. Leela, or her reflection. She raised her hand and traced something in the air, a symbol. Looping and mirrored. And the house trembled. My reflection mouthed, "She's trying to pull you back." I didn't know whether that was a warning or a lure, but I knew I couldn't stay still. I ran to the basement, hoping the breaker panel still worked. It did. But when I flipped the switch, every wall lit up with blue, white grids, like a simulation map coming online. The house wasn't built, it was rendered. Each line pulsed in time with my heartbeat. A voice filled the space, not Leela's, not Daniel's, but something colder, stability compromised. A merge in progress. I sprinted upstairs, grabbed Sophie, and held her tight. The mirror in the hallway had turned liquid now, its surface rippling. From inside, the other Alina extended a hand, eyes pleading. "Let me fix it," she said. "One of us has to go back." I shook my head. "Not her," I said, voice cracking. "She's just a child. She belongs here," my double whispered. "You don't." The walls groaned, glass spider webbing with light. I turned toward Sophie. "Whatever happens, remember me," I said. She started to cry. I pulled her close, took one step forward, and shoved her through the mirror before I could think twice. The surface swallowed her like water. I reached after her, but my hand hit solid glass again, cold, final. The world flickered once, twice, then steadied. The house was silent. The mirror showed only me now, standing alone. Outside, the same car drove past one last time, then vanished. The clock stopped ticking. I looked at my reflection. It blinked in perfect time with me again. No delay, no echo. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled, and I whispered to no one. Did I send her back, or did I send her deeper? The mirror didn't answer. It only smiled. The silence after Sophie vanished felt like pressure in my chest, as if the air itself had forgotten how to move. The house looked the same, but everything inside it had gone hollow. When I spoke, my voice didn't echo, it was absorbed, swallowed. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, the walls, the things that should have anchored me. They had no warmth. It was like living inside a photograph of my life. I sat at the kitchen table and whispered her name again and again, hoping that the house, whatever intelligence pulsed beneath its glass skin, would give her back. Nothing answered. The clock on the wall ticked twice and then stopped completely, as if time had decided it was done. For 3 days I moved through that suspended world, half awake, half remembering. I slept with the lights on, afraid that if darkness came, I'd wake in a different version of myself. On the 4th morning, a faint knock came from inside the hallway mirror. Once, soft. Then again. I froze. The surface was fogged, and in the condensation a small handprint appeared, too small to be mine. "Sophie," I breathed. The glass cleared slowly, revealing her face, pale and distorted by light. She looked tired but alive. "Mom," she said, her voice muffled. "It's cold here." My chest broke open. "Where are you?" She glanced behind her, eyes wide. "There's a door, but it keeps moving. Leela says you have to finish it." Leela. That name again, like static in my head. The image of her flickered beside Sophie for a heartbeat, sharp as lightning. "You can bring her back," Leela said, voice echoing from nowhere. "But you'll have to remember everything he erased." The mirror went dark. I pressed my hands against it, leaving smears that glowed faintly before fading. The notebook, Daniel's notebook, still lay on the table. I opened it to the last page. There in his jagged handwriting, "If subject E achieves self-awareness, initiate phase echo. The key is beneath the memory. The basement. I knew it before I finished reading." The stairs creaked as if protesting each step. Down there, the air was heavy, metallic. I moved the workbench aside and found a panel in the floor I'd never seen before. Underneath was a recessed chamber filled with shallow light. Inside lay a console, glass, wires, and a single red switch labeled Echo. The hum around me deepened, the sound of a sleeping thing waking. "Beneath the memory," I whispered, tracing the glass. I pressed the switch. The world fractured. Every surface turned to mirror, endless layers folding inward. I saw my life in fragments: wedding day, Sophie's birth, the night of the experiment, all repeating, overlapping. My reflection stepped out of the nearest wall and faced me. "You can't keep splitting," she said. "Every choice creates another version. End it before none of us are real." I wanted to ask how, but she raised a trembling hand toward my chest. "Erase one memory. The moment Daniel brought you back, If you forget that, everything stabilizes. The thought hit like ice water. That moment was the anchor of all of this. To erase it might mean losing everything that came after, including Sophie. But the house was already dissolving, rooms blinking in and out like dying pixels. I closed my eyes and pictured the night of the lab, the smell of antiseptic, Daniel's voice, the flash of light, and then I let it go. When I opened my eyes, the world had gone silent again, but different this time. The walls were no longer glass. The light was natural, golden. I stood in our real kitchen, the one I remembered before the fractures began. The clock ticked normally. Outside, birds moved without looping. I heard footsteps, small and quick, and turned. Sophie ran in, messy-haired, clutching her rabbit. "Mom, you overslept." She laughed. I dropped to my knees and held her, afraid to breathe. Her warmth was real, her heartbeat quick against mine. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am now," I said, though part of me wondered what price I'd paid. On the counter lay the notebook, blank except for one faint line scrawled across the first page. "The echo that remains believes she's the original." I looked up, and for a split second the kitchen window showed not the street outside, but another version of me, standing in the same spot, smiling faintly. Then it faded, replaced by sunlight. I told myself it was only memory, but when I touched the glass it felt warm, as if someone on the other side had just done the same. For a few days after Sophie's return, life slid back into something that could pass for ordinary. Morning light through real curtains, the smell of coffee instead of ozone, the uneven ticking of the clock that reassured me I was back in a world that made mistakes. But the quiet didn't feel natural. It felt rehearsed, like a lull before something realized it had been left unfinished. Sophie laughed easily now, but sometimes I'd catch her staring at nothing, her head tilted slightly as if listening to music too faint for me to hear. When I asked what she was thinking about, she'd smile and say, "Just remembering." The first time she said it, I thought nothing of it. The third time, the words made the back of my neck prickle. Remembering what? On the fifth night, I woke to the sound of running water. The bathroom light was on, the door half open. Inside, Sophie stood at the sink, staring into the mirror. "Sweetheart," I said gently. "What are you doing?" She didn't look up. "She said I need to wash it off," she whispered. "The wrong skin." My stomach dropped. I crossed the room and touched her shoulder. Her reflection looked at me before she did. Half a beat too early, eyes cold and knowing. Then the lights flickered and everything snapped back to normal. "Mom," she said, blinking up at me. "Did I do something bad?" I hugged her tight, heart hammering, trying not to let her feel me shaking. "No, baby. Go back to sleep." But when she turned away, her reflection didn't. It smiled. The next morning I tried to call Daniel's lab, but the line was dead. Every number I dialed either rang forever or connected to static. Even the television refused to stay on one channel. Every few minutes the screen flickered to gray, and a voice whispered fragments of sentences I couldn't understand, like listening to a dream in reverse. I unplugged it, but the screen stayed faintly lit, a single pulsing dot at its center. I began noticing small inconsistencies. The newspaper dated a day ahead. The calendar showing the wrong year. A photograph on the wall where Sophie's hair was longer than it should have been. I thought I was losing my mind until Sophie came to me with a drawing she'd made. Our house, but upside down, the roof underground and the windows spilling light into the earth. She said, "This is where we live now," she told me. Between the two. I asked her who she was, though I already knew. Sophie looked almost apologetic. "The other mom." That night, thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. The sound came from deep underground, vibrating through the floorboards. I went to the basement, flashlight shaking in my hand. The wall where the hidden console had been was smooth now, seamless, as if it had never existed. But the air hummed faintly, like a breath held too long. In the beam of the flashlight, the concrete rippled. I stepped back, but the shape that pressed through the wall wasn't human. It was a silhouette of light, forming and reforming. Me, but inverted, like a photograph developing in reverse. Her voice emerged inside my head, perfectly calm. "You turned off the wrong memory." I ran upstairs. Every mirror in the house was awake now. Surfaces breathing, pulling faintly toward me like magnetized glass. Sophie stood in the hallway, eyes wide, staring at her reflection. "She says it's time," she murmured. I grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me. There's no she. It's just us." But even as I said it, I saw something flicker in her pupils. Tiny mirrored movements that weren't hers. The house groaned, lights dimming. I dragged her toward the front door, but it was already gone, replaced by smooth white wall. The mirrors pulsed brighter, humming in sync with my heartbeat. Then came Daniel's voice, faint but unmistakable, phase reversal initiated. His tone was calm, clinical, detached. Subject E exceeded containment parameters. Sequence must complete. I screamed his name, but it only echoed back as static. The world began to turn inside out. The ceiling folded into the floor, gravity shifting until I couldn't tell which way was up. Sophie clung to me, crying, "Mom, it hurts!" The mirrors split open like wounds of light, and from each one, another version of us stepped through, endless copies, their faces blank and dissolving. I saw one with my hair gray, one with Sophie older, one where Daniel stood beside me holding a child I didn't recognize. They merged and peeled away, a kaleidoscope of possibilities collapsing into noise. Through the chaos, Leela appeared, or what was left of her. Her body flickered like a glitching image, half transparent, eyes bright with grief. "It's undoing itself," she said. "He built the reversal to erase us all if the balance broke." "Then stop it," I shouted. "I can't. Only you can." "How?" "Remember the real one." The floor cracked open beneath me, lights spilling upward like water. I closed my eyes and tried to hold on to the only thing I knew was real: Sophie's laughter, her heartbeat, the smell of her hair when she fell asleep against my chest. I spoke her name aloud and felt something shift. The hum stuttered, the mirrors froze mid-glow. When I opened my eyes, everything was still. The house, the light, the air. Sophie was gone. So was Leela. Only silence remained. Then, faintly from the kitchen, the clock began ticking again. I followed the sound. On the counter lay a single mirror shard, small enough to fit in my palm. Inside it, I saw Sophie sleeping peacefully in another world. Our world, maybe, and behind her, a woman who looked like me watching over her. The image faded before I could decide which one of us was real. Outside, dawn broke, gray and trembling. The house was quiet, the reflection gone. I stood there holding the shard, my face fractured into a dozen smaller versions of itself, and whispered, "Whichever one you are, keep her safe." The glass warmed against my skin, pulsed once, then went dark. Morning arrived thin and unreal, as if the sun itself were still deciding whether to rise. I sat at the kitchen table, the shard of mirror wrapped in a dish towel, afraid to touch it again. Every sound in the house had changed pitch overnight. The refrigerator hummed sharper, the wind higher, the creak of the floorboards almost musical. It felt like the world had been tuned slightly wrong. When I breathed, the air tasted of copper and static. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I'd imagined everything. But deep down I knew the reversal hadn't stopped. It had only slowed, waiting. I walked from room to room counting things: 4 chairs, 12 photographs, 7 windows. Except every time I reached the last number, something else appeared or vanished. The house was rewriting itself sentence by sentence. By noon the sky had turned the color of old film. I heard voices outside, faint, overlapping. A child's laugh, Daniel's low murmur, Leela's quiet hum, and when I looked out the window, the street was wrong. Houses stretched too far back, repeating themselves, an optical illusion that made me dizzy. In the distance, people moved like reflections, their outlines blurring whenever I blinked. I realized with a chill that they weren't moving away from me. They were looping the same steps over and over. The world was stuck in playback. I went back to the table and opened Daniel's notebook, the pages now filled with handwriting that wasn't his. Every iteration believes it's the final one. The first line read, "When the subject perceives decay, the system attempts self-correction." I flipped another page. A sketch showed the outline of a brain connected to a geometric lattice labeled quantum memory spine. Beneath it, in smaller print, the observer stabilizes the frame. My throat tightened. I was the observer. The only thing keeping this world from collapsing was me still believing it existed. That's when the house spoke again. Not a voice, but a vibration through the floorboards that formed words in my head. You shouldn't have sent her away. The lights dimmed to a cold blue. I clutched the towel, wrapped Shard, and whispered, "Where is she?" The answer came in images, Sophie running through a field of glass, calling for me, Leela beside her, half transparent, pointing toward a horizon that kept folding in on itself. Then the vision cracked like a mirror dropped on stone. I ran to the basement, driven by instinct more than thought. The wall where the console had been was open again, the space behind it glowing faintly. Inside, suspended in a clear chamber, floated something like a heart made of light. Wires fed into it from the walls, pulsing gently. I knew without knowing how that it was the experiment's core, the intersection point where all versions of our world converged. And I could feel Daniel there, not physically but as an echo threaded through the circuits. "You were supposed to live," his voice said, thin as static. "Not repair." Anger flared through the fear. "You broke us," I shouted. "You turned memory into a maze!" "It was meant to save you," the voice replied. But the pattern learned to dream. Once it began rewriting itself, I couldn't stop it. "You can." "How?" "End the observation." The chamber brightened. I understood then. If I stopped perceiving the world, if I let go of the belief holding it together, the system would collapse, freeing whatever remained real on the other side. Maybe Sophie, maybe nothing. My hands trembled. Upstairs, glass shattered, mirrors waking all at once, whispering fragments of my own voice back at me. I thought of Sophie's laughter, of Leela's eyes filled with regret, of Daniel trapped somewhere inside his own design. I thought of every version of myself still walking in endless mirrored rooms, all waiting for me to choose. I pressed my palm against the glowing core. It was warm, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The hum built until the air turned liquid, vibrating so fast it blurred the edges of sight. Images flooded my mind. Every life I'd lived, every reflection, every false dawn, folding into one another until I couldn't tell which belonged to me. Then everything went white. When the light faded, I was standing in a field under a gray sky. The air smelled of rain and burnt electricity. In the distance stood a small house, the same shape, the same windows, but made of glass that shimmered like water. A figure stood at the door. "Sophie," she waved, smiling. Beside her a shadow moved, taking the outline of a woman, familiar, patient, waiting. "Leela, or me, or both." I started toward them. But the ground rippled beneath my feet, and I realized the world was dissolving from the edges inward. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Let her stay." The wind rose, carrying away my words like dust. When I opened my eyes again, the field was empty. Only the shard of mirror remained, half buried in the grass, reflecting a single image of Sophie in sunlight, laughing. I turned it over and saw a faint engraving on the back, words etched in Daniel's hand. "Reality is what the last observer remembers." The shard grew cold in my palm. I didn't know if I was still that last observer or just another echo in her dream. But somewhere, far beyond the collapsing horizon, a child's laughter rang out, real enough for me to believe in, one last time. The world is quieter now. Not empty, just hushed, like a theater after the credits, when the lights have come up but no one has yet decided to leave. I walk through what remains of the field, the grass shifting between green and silver, depending on how long I look at it. The horizon wavers, and sometimes I glimpse the outline of the house again. Sometimes it's whole, sometimes only foundation and air. My body feels lighter here, half anchored, as if the gravity that held me to one world is still deciding whether I belong to this one. The mirror shard rests in my pocket, cool against my leg, humming faintly with the pulse of a heartbeat that may or may not be mine. I speak aloud just to hear a voice. The sound folds back gently, no echo, only absorption. "Sophie, I whisper, and the grass bends, listening. I keep walking until the landscape thins into glass. Every step leaves a print of light that fades behind me. The sky bends lower, pressing color into the ground, gold, then violet, then something between. In that shifting spectrum I see faces. Leela's, Daniel's, my own reflected at different ages, passing across the surface like clouds. None of them linger. When Daniel appears, he is young again, eyes unguarded, the way he looked before the experiments began. He doesn't speak, but the expression is apology, relief, and farewell all at once. Then he dissolves into brightness. I realize I am not grieving him anymore. I am remembering him correctly for the first time, without distortion. Maybe that's what he wanted all along. A memory strong enough to survive its own collapse. The hum in the distance builds low and steady. The world is preparing to fold itself closed. I can feel each layer tightening, each reflection sliding into the one beneath it. If I stay, I'll become part of the lattice again, one more image in the infinite film reel. If I let go, maybe the frame will hold without me. The mirror shard vibrates harder, the engraving on its back glowing faintly. Reality is what the last observer remembers. I realize the line isn't a warning, it's an instruction. To save what matters, I don't have to hold on. I have to choose what to remember. So I sit in the field and close my eyes. I think of Sophie's laugh echoing down the hallway, of her tiny hand gripping mine at the fair, of the way she used to fall asleep mid-sentence and wake believing she'd finished the thought. I remember Leela standing in the mirrored doorway, face full of fierce mercy, whispering that she was me first. I remember the smell of rain in the real world, the imperfection of light bulbs that flicker, the uneven heartbeat of a house alive with ordinary noise. I gather them carefully, like photographs before a storm, and whisper, "Keep these." The shard warms once, then stills. When I open my eyes, the field is gone. I am sitting in a kitchen bathed in soft morning light. The clock ticks unevenly. A bird sings outside, off-key. The air smells of coffee and burnt toast. Everything imperfect, everything alive. On the counter, a framed picture. Sophie at 10, paint on her hands, smiling into the camera. No mirrors, no hum, no repetition. Just the hush of a world breathing on its own. I touch the photograph and feel the grain of paper, rough and real beneath my fingers. Somewhere, faintly, I hear a voice, Leela's or my own, saying, "You chose well. I don't know if this place will last an hour or a lifetime. I don't know if anyone outside this room exists. But the air moves when I exhale, and dust swirls in the light, and that's enough proof for me." I stand, pour coffee into a chipped mug, and watch steam twist upward until it disappears. For the first time, the vanishing doesn't frighten me. It feels like completion. I lift the mug in a quiet toast to the unseen horizon. For you, Sophie, I say. For all the versions that loved you. The clock ticks once, twice, perfectly out of sync. A laugh echoes faintly down the hall, small, bright, unmistakably hers. I close my eyes and let it carry through me, through every version that ever was, until there is nothing left but light and breath and the memory of being real.